Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another tutoring tips episode of Prepped and Polished podcast. It's Delvina Miremadi Baldino with Realize Your Resilience. Please be sure to check out our website at www.preppedandpolished.com for more information. While you're there, sign up for our free tutoring and test prep tips newsletter. It comes out monthly. You can join our Prepped and Polished community on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Prepped and Polished. You can submit a question during the show or after to radio@preppedandpolished.com. We love hearing from you. Now let's get right to episode number 145. Just because your brain wants you to worry doesn't mean you have to. Do you ever worry about the future? Maybe you worry about what other people think of you. Maybe you often think of the worst case scenario and then let that thought cycle through your mind over and over again. Well, if you answered yes to this, you're definitely not alone. The fact is, our brains are actually wired this way. The brain was designed for survival, which means when we face a challenge, your brain reacts as though it's in danger. For example, when you sit down to take an important exam, and then suddenly you realize that you've studied all the wrong material, that feeling that you get, what happens in your body, that's your brain sending a signal to your body that there's a problem, that you're under stress, that there's danger. What's interesting about that process is your brain is actually sending a signal that's more reflective of you living in the caveman era where you're in the woods and encountering a grizzly bear. So when you're under stress taking the exam, it's like you're staring danger in the face like a grizzly bear. The exact same thing happens in your brain. This biological reaction explains why we all worry so much. We're wired to worry about the threats of the future, that possible grizzly bear that lurks around the corner, the worst case scenario that might threaten our survival. Fortunately, this same threat of survival is not the same part of our daily lives as it used to be. And so we don't really need to worry in order to survive. We don't need this constant state of fight or flight that we used to. And so while a little bit of worry is good and it can protect us from those, unnecessary risk-taking or keep us moving in the right direction, too much worry is no longer necessary and can actually prevent us from living a happy and fulfilling life. So let's talk about our brain and how it's wired, and how just because it may be wired this way doesn't mean you can't change it. There are ways to dispute your worry and live a more fulfilling, happy life and really stop those fears about the future. So start by first identifying the type of worry you might be experiencing. Worry usually shows up in two ways. It could be in the form of a question. So maybe you say, what if blank happens? Another way worry might show up is through a judgment of the future. I'll never be blank. I'll never do this. I'll never be that person you want to be. So once you've identified the type of worry, try one of these two techniques to combat it. According to author Susan Jeffers, our fears are less about the actual future circumstance and more about the fear that we won't be able to handle that circumstance. So one way to combat this type of worry is search for the evidence. Start by looking back on your past and remembering that anything that has ever happened, you have handled. There's evidence to support this all around you. Create a mantra like, I can do it, I can handle this, and believe in your ability to get through whatever it is that lies ahead. For more on this technique, I'd suggest you check out Susan's book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And number 2, worrying about what other people think of you can create this debilitating effect that fosters shyness and an inability to really be your authentic self. This then presents to people a person who's not really you. And this can prevent real relationships from forming, which then becomes this like self-fulfilling prophecy about having this worry about what other people think of you. So the next time you find yourself worrying about what other people are thinking, try this. Get out of your head and listen. Focus on deeply listening to what the other person is saying, what they're feeling. Empathize with them. Try and steer your thoughts in a direction that is about them, not you. So what are they saying? What are they feeling? And what do they need from you right now? This wraps up our show, episode number 145. Just because your brain wants you to worry doesn't mean you have to. If you're interested in more information like this, please check out www.realizeyourresilience.com and learn more about the various resources and services we offer to help students foster their unique capacity for resilience and discover their individualized pathways to success. Be on the lookout for our next podcast, episode number 146, our next interview with DJ Shri of the popular Mobile DJ Tips podcast. And remember, to access all of our podcast episodes, go to www.preppedandpolished.com/podcast. Thanks for joining us on Prepped and Polished Podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.